Welcome back, everyone. So, this is kind of coincidental. I had just finished a video that I split into 3 parts discussing the topic of abortion with Bobby B. And not too long after that, this piece of news comes out that the Supreme Court is trying to overrule Roe v. Wade. And it's very, very interesting. Very coincidental. TJ Kirk put out a video, The Amazing Atheist, which I've watched, and I have to say I really love it. I agree with what he says in that particular video. That I don't necessarily, I don't know that I'm necessarily as evangelical about it as he is. I don't want to come on and just go crazy, like angry about all this. But a lot of what he says, I do agree with it. Now, I also on the cusp of this, Vosh released a video about it. I haven't taken the time to watch Vosh's video. But it too, I do plan on watching to see what his take is, and there is some interest in interesting things about it. So, first of all, in TJ Kirk's video, he points out the 14th Amendment, privacy in the right to privacy in the Constitution, and he also points out the Obergefell V Hodges for gay rights. And the reason why I find that interesting is because due to extreme right-wing populism, there has been a very big attack on rights and liberties, and it's not just with abortion. Now, the Bobby B's position is that he is pro-choice, but under extenuating circumstances. But what we've been seeing in legislation and bills being passed against abortion, it does not include those extenuating circumstances. It excludes them. And it doesn't stop at abortion. There's other things going on, and not just Ron DeSantis in Florida and his things that he's doing. I could swear to you that before gay marriage became a thing, I could have sworn society was more tolerant and accepting of the LGBT community than after gay marriage was approved. And it's crazy. And I've been constantly left with the question, the never-ending why is that? I can't answer that. I don't know the answer. So I will have the link to TJ Kirk's The Amazing Atheist video, and I'd recommend that you watch it. A lot of very right-wing people will probably not appreciate it at all, and that's just to be expected. But he does, I think, make some very valid points in regards to this topic on it. He does bring up he makes the point that this whole, the Democrats saying, well, vote for me, and we'll make sure this doesn't happen. And he makes the point that this should have happened a long time ago, and it could have happened during several times when there was a Democrat majority to codify Roe v. Wade, and it never happened. So they've had their opportunity, and it's interesting that the Democrats go, well, you better vote for us if you want it codified. And that's a really interesting stunt and kind of messed up. And it should have just been codified. And it does rest within women's reproductive rights. as T.J. Kirk argues much better than myself. I'm not going to get into that. But another thing I think that he brought up that people will have an issue with that I actually agree on is that Tim Pool is nonsense. He is. Tim Pool does not report the news. What he does is he takes news articles and makes commentary about them. So he finds a news article, he makes commentary about them, which is him giving you his opinion about the article that someone else wrote. That's not journalism. He's reacting to somebody who actually did journalism. And I find it very interesting that people consider him to be doing journalism. If he was, some of his early work was journalism, where he was actually taking cameras out in the real world and interviewing people and asking questions and digging into things. I find that stuff to be actual journalism, but what he does now is just, he's basically a reaction channel, is what he is. But people call it news, and I find that strange. And in many ways, the Republicans are becoming the enemy of freedom as more and more campaign against things like voting rights, all the way to calling voting, which is a very archaic way of viewing voting, as a privilege. And not in the sense of, oops, you went to jail on a felony charge and lost your right to vote. They are very aggressively attacking liberties and freedoms as they see certain groups as undeserving of rights and liberties. So some of the rights and liberties that they are attacking is like, for example, the right or ability of people of color to vote. That's been a thing. People can have debated that. But if we're turning back the clock to where LGBT people are second-class citizens, where people like John Wayne Gacy can get away with murdering 32 boys, being undetected for a good period of time because no one was paying attention, because that's really what turning LGBT people into second-class citizens does. It makes it so that, and you guys have to understand, this didn't happen too long ago. Just back in the 90s, like the early mid-90s, it was a thing that if your parents, if their kid came out as gay or trans or lesbian, that they would be disowned. And you would find 15-year-olds living on the streets because they were disowned by their parents. That was an actual issue. Or instances like John Wayne Gacy or Brett Bordello, who murdered tons of gay men because they were doing whatever they could to survive, and they'd pick these guys up and kill them, and no one would notice because they've been disowned by their family, and these people would get away with mass murder. So that's kind of just something to think about, is that these things have consequences. And I find it interesting, too, that a lot of very right-wing people seem to say, we have a horrible track record of remembering history, particularly history that happened 200 years ago. Or maybe a little less, maybe 100 to 200 years ago. But it seems like they have a even more difficult problem with short-term memory of things that happened 50, 60 years ago. Like the populism of far-right ideology, like ethno-nationalism, National Socialism, things of that nature. It's like, do you really want that? I look at people like my grandparents who are conservative Christian Republicans, and the moment, the utterance of economic fascism, which is something that, what is his name? Steve Bannon at a lecture he did at a college university, he called himself an economic fascist. See, the thing with my grandparents is they perceive communism and fascism in the very same sense. They're both bad. And it's really interesting when 90-year-old individuals that have proclaimed to be conservative Christian Republicans their whole lives find themselves in the position to not even call themselves Republicans, and they've started taking on that title, that cute little title of classical liberal, because they don't want to be associated with a group that ties themselves to fascism in any way. They also have a different view and look on title socialism or mixed economies. They have a very different view on that than these conservatives, some of the conservatives we see about today. I really like how C.R. Williams looks at rights and liberties, as I've had a conversation with him about this before. As he has said, people don't take away rights and liberty. They don't take rights and liberties from you. They violate them. This entails or implies that rights and liberties are a given, and we do not. They're a given. You don't take them. No one can take them from you. They violate them is what they do. And I would say that LGBT people are given rights and liberties as well. It's starting to not seem that way, and I'm going somewhere with that. I'm going to try and stay on talk about the abortion thing. So, with the abortion thing, what Bobby B was saying, well, that doesn't even matter now. If they overturn Roe v. Wade, it won't matter. That you're okay with it in extenuating circumstances. If they overturn Roe v. Wade, the extenuating circumstances won't even apply anymore. The other thing I'd like to talk about is that I do know that we do not live in a direct democracy, as this was said by Bill Mahar as well, that we live in a hybrid democracy known as a republic. But we also put a constitution to protect the minority from the majority rule, which was really important. I think the Founding Fathers did understand that society changes, and as I pointed out to my friend Cassandra in a private conversation, this part isn't private, this is okay. I pointed out, and I think she was having a debate with somebody about abortion, or what the Founding Fathers would have thought about the principles of Christianity being pertained to the United States. And it's like, well, they put secularism in there for good reason. They put religious freedom. So that should entail the right to not believe as well. So, and it's very interesting because it's not forced secularism. It's sort of a liberal secularism or democratic secularism. But I would say that, if we could knock on the coffins of the Founding Fathers and ask them these questions, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? At some point, they would probably have to say, look, we did the best we could at the time, given the knowledge that we had. And at some point, you're just going to have to take freedoms and liberties very seriously and make these decisions for yourself. And when you make these decisions, hope that you make them without messing up the country. And like I said, taking freedoms and liberties very seriously, because there's a lot of things that we have today that they couldn't have possibly fathomed, especially in the day of the information age, where you can Google something so quickly and learn about it. So we have access to more information than they ever did, and society was going to progress in ways that they couldn't have possibly understood. And there were even people who helped create the Constitution that were openly, well, maybe not openly, but definitely known as secularist or let's be honest, atheist, people like Benjamin Franklin. And there were people who helped write it that were even against slavery and considered that to be a violation of rights, liberties, and freedom. So I think that's why they put that in. Now, to the Christian, there's a lot of the times the religious folks, they like to throw out the religious argument against abortion, and T.J. Kirk quotes numbers from the Bible, Numbers 5:11 to 5:31, then quotes Numbers 5:19 to 5:21, the bitter water curse. As T.J. Kirk accurately states in the video, there's not one word prohibiting prohibition in the Bible, and not because it didn't exist. The Bible absolutely does condone abortion, and, in fact, infanticide, for that matter, in certain contexts. So, if we're going off of what the Bible says, then we're not going off of what the Bible says, because the Bible doesn't say not to do it, it says to do it. Under extenuating circumstances, ironically. So I do think that this is a dangerous thing, the idea of overturning Roe versus Wade, as there are circumstances and many arguments that suggest that we should keep this. It has to do with the right to health care. It has to do with a woman's right to bodily autonomy. It has to do like there's even the old notion, an old argument is that if males were the ones that carried the child, then abortion would have been legalized a long time ago. The other thing to consider that, yes, before it was made legal, it was done illegally anyway, which performed a lot of very, very concerning health circumstances for the females. And it is a really weird slant to force a female into motherhood against her will, if that's not something she wants to do. I did see on Facebook, I saw a TikToker that was saying that this is because the people want this because the white race is going extinct. I'm doing that with air quotes. I'm sorry, and I'm using the camera. I don't feel like getting out of my pajamas. The forced motherhood aspect to me is pretty messed up. I mean, oh yeah, we were talking about the. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So I don't buy into the whole racialized shenanigans. I mean, it is shenanigans. The fact of the matter is there's genetic proponents that exist in all of us. That's carrying on throughout the centuries. And let's say, you like a white person has sex with a person of color. It's like, well, your genetic lineage or whatever is still being carried on in that person. So I fail to see the relevance of what color a human being is. It's completely irrelevant, or at least it should be. It's completely irrelevant. That's something that, racially focused people, and I don't really care what ethnicity you are, like what your skin color is. If you have racialized lenses and all you focus on is the color of a person's skin, I find that very, very bizarre. And it's really irrelevant, at least from my perspective. So I wanted to show these screenshots that I took from TJ Kirk's video. So I would just, I mean, like, it would be easier, I suppose, to just do like a response. But he like in this, well, I suppose I could superimpose some of these on, because I've already brought up the God aspect and the biblical quotes. So those should show up there. Oh yeah, this one. I also wanted to talk about that TJ Kirk, I think, rightfully brought up, is this right-wing propagandist push to call anything that is leftist ideas, leftist policy, leftist, pretty much anything that's left is suddenly communistic. And it's getting old and tired, annoying, and really, really, it seems like the people are uneducated. People do not know the difference between a mixed economy, which most people who refer to mixed economy, they talk about socialism in the United States. They're not talking about replacing capitalism. They're talking about mixed economy of capitalism and socialism. And that's what we refer to in the United States as socialism. But it keeps being conflated to communism. And it's like, this is really weird, because this is, people have been using these systems and actually benefit. People who are against it benefit. I have even heard this from my own grandparents that have fallen for this crap of this right-wing propagandist thing of calling anything leftist communist, or socialism equals communism. It doesn't. The thing is that we've lived in a mixed economy of capitalism and socialism for a very long time. I think this dates back to probably the 1920s, 1930s. And people who receive SSI for retirement, guess what? That's a social safety net. That's what leftists are referring to when they talk about socialism in the United States. Is things like that. And I've heard my own grandparents do that, is they'll sit there and say, oh, socialism is bad, it's big government, it's evil, it's horrible. Basically, they don't say it's communism, but they basically equate it to, like, it's bad like communism, it's dictatorship, it's totalitarianism. And then in the same paragraph or sentence on the phone conversation, turn around and say, I'm so grateful for the SSI that I get for retirement. I don't know what we'd do without it. So you like socialism when it benefits you, but if it doesn't benefit you, then you don't care. And that's one thing that I have a real problem with, is this whole deregulate. I really love it when people say that they hate regulations at all. No, you hate very specific regulations. Not all regulations are bad. Some are, and I will admit that. Some regulations are terrible, and they are power grabs, and they're awful, and they should be stopped. And the government organizations that do this do need better oversight to make sure that power is not consolidated. Absolutely, I would totally agree with that. But if we just got rid of the FDA tomorrow, all I would have to say to that is, have fun shitting out all the lead in people you're about to eat. Because that's one of the reasons the FDA was put into place in the first place, was because that was happening. People were consuming toxins, things that are really not good for you and cause a lot of health problems, or people would lose limbs or fall into a vat of mixed meat and you'd end up eating people. This was illustrated. I keep talking about this. I've talked about this over and over and over and over again. There was an investigative journalist back in the 1920s that published a book called The Jungle that went through the factory working conditions that people were in and exposed a lot of stuff that people were really unsettled by. And this was not a politically divisive thing at the time. This was shocking to anyone, anywhere, except for, the people who owned the businesses. They didn't want, intervention, because that means that they would have to do something about it, which might boo-hoo-hoo cut into their bottom line. Boo-hoo-hoo, I'm so sorry. I have very little sympathy for that. I really do. But I am really getting sick of this. When I say regulations on capitalism, when we talk about making our social safety nets better and establishing a basic standard living, the right wing is so quick to jump up and say, communism, or just equate socialism to communism or mixed economy to communism, period. And that's so brainless to me. That's so stupid. Because, like I said, we have had SSI, SSDI, foster care. Okay, that's a social safety net from our mixed economy of capitalism and socialism. Foster care. Foster care is in real bad shape, by the way. We say we care about these kids, but what these kids are going through in foster care is awful. And honestly, the foster care system might need more money to support it, so that these kids are not, you don't have 35 kids living in someone's closet that's being abused out in the middle of nowhere, with very, very few social workers to oversee it. So again, we have a lot of social safety nets here in the United States, but they're dysfunctional as hell. They get defunded. Actually, I just found out from the SSA in the state that I live in, personally, there was an outreach program that helped people with disabilities find work based on their restrictions and accommodations. Well, that was defunded by Senator Brownback, who was a Republican. He defunded it, kept the money, and ran. And now that program no longer exists. So that's fun. And that's why I'm not sure about all these cut spending. I realize we don't like paying taxes, and when I talk to more reasonable right-leaning people, and they talk to me about the security of choice, that's something that I take very, very much to heart. And I think a lot of these programs, I think it would be a lot better if choice was implemented. Or at the very least, it's something that we all have access to. For instance, you pay into disability income your whole life, your whole working life, and it acts like an insurance company now. It acts like a scheme. And so it's like, give us money, give us money, give us money. And then when you actually need to use it, they go, oh, no, we don't want you to do that. We just want to keep the money. Well, no, that's horse shit. Your SSDI and SSI are government programs. It shouldn't act like an insurance corporation that just wants to take your money and never wants you to actually use the service that you're paying for. That's my cute little rant on that. I'm getting really sick and tired of the everything that the left does is communism. And TJ Kirk makes a very valid point in his video by saying that, what does he say? Supporting abortion and trans rights equals communism. No, it doesn't. What the hell is communistic about that? It's a position that people are taking societally. It's been politicized, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a communist thing. It's not a democracy thing. It's just a position for societal change. So, I'm really glad that he brought that up, because it is getting really annoying. The whole, well, it's all socialism. Socialism is communism. Everything that the left does is communism. It's getting old, you guys. It's seriously, it's getting really old and tired. All right, so now I'm going to take a pit stop here, and I'm going to go over an article on why this also affects LGBT rights, or what the concern with this overturning Roe v. Wade does in response to the 14th Amendment. I'm going to show you what is going on as a pushback to LGBT people. So this article is something interesting I found. It's from the Kansas City Star from Kansas City. CoLiving rentals banned in this Johnson County city after unanimous council vote. Let's see. On Monday, now if you don't, you guys probably aren't familiar with the Kansas City area, so let me tell you that Shawnee is a suburb of Kansas City. It's a city in Johnson County on the Kansas side of Kansas City that did this. They said on Monday, a Johnson County city unanimously voted to ban living arrangement aimed at helping tenants decrease the amount of rent they pay. The Shawnee City Council voted 8-0 to ban co-living, becoming among the first Kansas City area municipalities to prevent the practice, which has gained popularity in recent years as rent and home prices have soared. The new ordinance defines a co-living group as a group of at least 4 unrelated, that's important, I need you to focus on this word, and I'm going somewhere with that, unrelated adults living together in a dwelling unit. The ordinance stated that if one adult is unrelated to another adult, then the entire group will be classified as unrelated. Now, I'd also like to point out on the cost of living in Shawnee. Johnson County is kind of a rich, sort of more upper and middle class type area, so it is expensive. So to go on, it says, the practice, which includes things like sharing a kitchen, living room, and community areas, started to gain popularity as rental and housing prices continued to increase across the United States. Co-living has become increasingly popular because of its cost effectiveness and the greater flexibility in cities where rents are high for young professionals, the Washington Post wrote in 2019. The City Council's vote came despite the presentation from a Johnson County organization where a housing study showed that the average home price in the county rose 37% from 2017 to 2021, climbing from $324,393 to $443,700. The study also showed that wages did not rise at the same rate. That is true. The minimum wage is still $7.25 in Kansas, and a lot of companies will get away with trying to pay you that if they can. Shawnee is one of the 3 largest communities in Johnson County, so what happens in Shawnee is really consequential for what happens to the rest of the county, said Christian, I don't know how to say her last name, whatever, Director of the Education and Planning for United Community Services of Johnson County. Oh, I guess it's Bowman. I should have thought, duh. Bowman said that the organization received a grant in 2017 from the Kansas Healthcare Foundation, which was part of a Healthy Communities initiative. The task was to identify a healthy equity issue, she said. Over and over again, what rose to the surface was the cost of housing was the thing that was impacting people's ability to be healthy. All right, now this is interesting because, for one, this is a huge slap in the face to anyone that's trying to survive in this economy. It's just like, well, we can be roommates and share rent and everything. That makes things cheaper, easier to live. We can exist and all that good stuff. So I don't know why they would take that away. That's weird. And I will tell you that I live in part of the Kansas City metro area, but thankfully I don't live in Shawnee. I live in a part of it that is overseen by Sharice Davis, and Sharice Davis will not let this happen. So, yeah, I guess the closer you get to the city, the actual Kansas City, the more left-leaning it gets, or centrist, really. But the thing that's interesting about this is the language that they're using in this is a lot like, if anyone's old enough to remember, if you're not, I'll let you know. The language in this bill is very, very similar to anti-LGBT bills that existed across the United States. I think going back like from the 80s and below, is that they didn't want people co-living together unless they were related. And that was to prevent domestic partnerships or gay couples from living with each other, which is really, really dangerous to LGBT rights. That and with people like Ron DeSantis and things that he's doing, and saying this big push to call, it's just like with the communist thing, this big push to call anything that's LGBT grooming, or correlating LGBTQIA plus people with pedophiles and zoophiles. It's ridiculous. There's probably a tiny bit of that, but all LGBT panels in every major city that I'm aware of has to chase the MAP people off, because they've been doing this for a long time. They've always tried to attach themselves to the LGBT rights movement. They've always done that. And we've always said, no, get lost. Fuck off. So that's getting really tired and old, is that just mentioning to kids that, hey, sometimes guys like other guys and girls like other girls. Or saying sometimes a person is born male but feels female inside, or vice versa, is somehow indoctrinating, or worse yet, grooming. Okay? We're not talking about teaching children about, like, butt sex or anything like that. Everyone except for chomos agrees that that is inappropriate. Everyone. Unless you're a chomo. I'm old school, so if you don't know what that means, I guess Google it. But unless you're a chomo, everyone agrees you should not be teaching kids about blatant sex. What people are doing is that they're not trying to teach kids about sex. They're trying to teach kids that gay people exist. Because there are children now, and have been for some time, with two moms or two dads. Or they have a parent dynamic that is a trans person and a cis person, or two trans people. And now, because of these pieces of legislation, they can't even tell kids about this. They can't educate them and say, hey, this is a part of the world you live in, just know that. will explain later when you get into high school and you take a biology class that entails sex ed. Which, I think at 17 years old could be appropriate. Especially in advocating for safe sex. Because let's face it, let's be honest with ourselves, teenagers are going to have sex. I know I did. So, if you think, too, that somebody at 16 or 17 years old doesn't know about those things by the time that they're going through sex ed, you are deluding yourself. Especially in the day of the internet. They've been exposed to it, and you may not even know it. I promise you that. So I find this crazy. The way that this bill is worded is very, very much very similar to anti-gay bills that existed about 30 some odd years ago to try and keep gay couples from living together. And that's very concerning to me. So I find it interesting that in light of this attack on Roe v. Wade that has very much to do with the 14th Amendment, which includes pieces of gay rights in it. And I think the case that T.J. Kirk was talking about was the case that was out of Texas where I believe it was firefighters or police officers or something busted in on a gay couple having sex, and they took it up to the Supreme Court, and it was overturned as sort of an unlawful search and seizure, which was a big wave in LGBT rights, as now it was that they really couldn't enforce anti-sodomy laws, or it was really, really difficult to, especially if it was done in the privacy of your own home, which is reasonable and respectable that sex should be done in the privacy of your own home, but that shouldn't just include, if we're going to say that to homosexuals, we can't just include homosexuals in that, we have to include heterosexuals. It implies you too. No sex in public, sorry. Egalitarian here. So I find that frightening because it simultaneously with all this anti-LGBT stuff going on, this Roe v. Wade overturning thing is going on, and if they overturn the Roe v. Wade, my fear is that the next step is to attack LGBT rights and send us back to where we couldn't get married. And I have said this before. I don't give as an atheist, I don't give a damn if your religious institution doesn't recognize gay marriage. I don't care about that. The issue here is legalities in the state not recognizing same-sex couples. And there are real legal ramifications to that. And that's the problem. Do I think that a gay person's homophobic father, who's the last kin should they die of something in a car crash or something like that, do I think that they should be allowed to just come in and take all their money when that's not what they wanted? Seize all their assets just because that's the next of kin, even though they had nothing to do with them? That's just one example. And that has happened. I've personally known people that's happened to before gay marriage was recognized. Or, the case of where there was a guy who was dying of cancer. He had stomach cancer. He was dying, and his boyfriend was not allowed to be by his side in his final moments because the fucking state didn't recognize gay unions. And it was thanks to the very, very nice and lovely doctors and nurses that cared and let that person in anyway. But technically that was illegal. So there's a lot of messed up things that can come from, and like I said, making LGBT people second-class citizens, putting them out on the street, that kind of thing, it makes them prone to being the targets of violent crimes. And, you know, we say we want a civilized society, right? I don't think LGBT rights are a threat to other people's civil rights, liberties, and freedoms. You don't learn to be gay. You're born with it. It's something that happens. It's part of nature. It's part of life. It's been around since man was able to document it. So, yeah. So I will leave a link to this article, and you can read it, and a link to TJ Kirk's video. And I do find it kind of ironic that just after I posted three videos discussing abortion and the meta-ethic rationality or philosophy behind that, from an existentialist point of view, that this trying to overturn Roe v. Wade thing happened. Very, very, I'm not going to use the word serendipitous, but very coincidental. And I don't agree with this. So, you know, leave your thoughts, opinions, reflections in the comment section below. And to the sane, right-leaning people out there that actually do support rights, liberties, and freedoms, I mean, you know, ill will. But seriously, the whole LGBTQIA plus is grooming, and well, grooming is the worst. And then indoctrinating is like, no, that's getting old and tired. And the whole anything that the left does is communism. That's getting really old and tired. I promise you, if you completely deregulated everything, you'd probably come to regret it. It really just depends on what the regulation is, right? It really just depends. Some are good, that we all enjoy and take advantage of, and some have been power grabs, and those need to probably stop. Right? So, one thing that I do appreciate is being able to carry an open dialogue even with people I disagree with. I'm a big advocate of freedom of speech, you know, after seeing the whole PMRC crap and the parental advisory stuff from back in the day, and needing to have my dad with me when I went into a record store. That was ridiculous. That's not something I want to revisit. And the other thing, too, on censorship is that whenever the left seems to push censorship, the right pushes right back, and that's not productive. And I think bad ideas need to be combated with good ideas, not censorship. Like, right now, a lot of those who have been quote-unquote censored have gone somewhere else, and now they're being radicalized, and they have no voice of opposition. So they have nowhere to go where they can see, well, this is a different valid point that goes against this narrative, and, you know, maybe it's a better one. You know, that doesn't exist. All right, so anyway, yeah, like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the bell button on any channel. Oh, yeah, I don't say that anymore. I'm tired of saying that, but you know what to do. And with that, I'm out.